Welcome to another riveting episode of Behind Breaking Bond. Joining me today, introduce yourself, Leticia.
Hi, I am Leticia Ybarra. I am a homicide victim advocate. My daughter, Jessica, was murdered in August of 2020, and I'm turning lemons into lemonade, and now I'm devoted to making good things come of it.
You sure are. Introduce yourself, young man.
Andy Kahn, Director of Victim Services, and both Jessica and I just came back from the swearing-in ceremony of one of our colleagues on Breaking Bond, who is now a judge, Emily DeToto.
Yeah,
Yes.
Emily DeToto, many times, she's a defense attorney, came on as a defense attorney, was a really good guest. She kind of gave sort of a whole other angle to a lot of stuff that we were talking about. And now she's a judge.
We've had not only her as a judge, but we also had other individuals that have appeared on this show that are now on the bench. So a word to those who are considering running for office, particularly a bench seat. We got a pretty good track record.
If you want to be a judge,
everyone who appeared on this show
Right.
was elected, or in Dan Simon's case, appointed.
Yeah. So if you want to be a judge, you got to be on Behind Breaking Bond.
Yes.
We've got a legislative session that's going on right now.
Right now, and they actually just appointed a speaker, so things are rolling. There's been several thousands bills already been filed. One that was filed that we'll be supporting again, that we've spoken about, and that was by Senator Huffman, and that is a constitutional amendment to allow judges discretion, and that's a key word, discretion, not to grant bond to defendants charged with certain violent crimes. And you remember the Jocelyn Nungery case.
Right.
People were outraged that the two defendants charged with her murder, kidnap, and sexual assault was actually given a bond. Granted, it was a large bond, but the fact that you had to give a bond really rubbed people the wrong way, and we're saying, you know what? You don't want that to happen? Let's get this passed. So I'm hopeful this session, the third time, will be the charm.
Because we've heard that over the years from judges that their hands are tied in a lot of ways as far as when it comes to the state constitution. Obviously, they have to post bond. They can't make it a disciplinary kind of a thing. They can't do it to hold somebody that should be able to get a bond, but they can put a higher bond on people, defendants that are charged with really
we've seen people make
crimes.
$1 million bonds before.
We have.
So it's not inconceivable. And I think the beauty of the constitutional amendment is the Texas voters
Right.
will get to decide whether they like this or they don't like it. So it'll be up to the Texas people of the state to determine whether or not judges should have discretion.
And you've gotten the feeling from judges that they want that they would
Even
want
some of the
this.
judges that we've
profiled, yeah.
we've regularly featured on this have actually said, no, we want discretion. We need discretion. And I see no harm in having discretion.
A lot of times for these bills to become law, you have people that testify. You've done that before. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was this last session. I was there for Senate Bill
402 by Whitmire,
Right.
yeah, now mayor.
which prioritized murder cases in our courts. So, as you know, or as we've probably all heard, there's a huge backlog, especially here in Harris County, with murder and capital murder cases. And so what this did was prioritize those cases, right? And so correct me if I'm wrong when I say anything. I'm just a mom trying to make a difference, so I don't.
He corrects me all the time.
I don't know all the
True.
legal, ins and outs. But,
Yeah.
So I know that violent crimes against children is priority.
Yes.
And so what we were asking is that in order to clear this backlog, could we please?
How are you
also
even
make
asked to
murder-
be up there? Walk us through. I mean, obviously, you walking in the shoes. Your daughter was murdered. You ended up getting a plea deal out of it.
Yeah, but that took 3 years.
3 years.
It took 3 years, and there was never any doubt of his innocence. I mean, he confessed.
Yeah.
And so it still took 3 years, right? And so, and I was told to expect even longer, 3, 4, 5 years even. I didn't have a timeline.
What was it like to go 3 years?
I mean, it's agonizing.
Yeah.
He had a pretty low bond, and so it's so stressful. I would have nightmares that at any moment someone was going to bail him out, right? And I was going to have to protect myself, protect my home, protect my family, my parents, You know, I had nightmares that I was going to open up the door in the morning.
There he
and
is.
He's going to be standing there.
Yeah.
I work, and there's just a bunch of things. You know, when you are in fear for your life and your safety, your mind goes everywhere. I don't know his parents. I don't know his family. They're going to come after me. Are they going to come after my children? I mean, you know, a lot of things. And so it was just really important to me, you know, to prioritize those cases. And so, you know, Andy brought it to my attention that this bill was going up, and, you know, I think it's our civic duty. These laws are made, and these lawmakers are there for us, right? We vote them in. They work for
That's
the
right.
state of Texas and for the people of Texas. And if there is a law that you have some direct experience in, then it is our duty to go and say something. And you know, I learned so much by going up there.
What was it like when you first walked in?
Oh, it's
I mean,
intimidating.
you've never done this, so.
It's intimidating. You know,
Yes.
I'd been to the Capitol building, a Capitol building. You know, I think all of us at some point in middle school maybe take a field trip.
Sure.
That was probably this was probably the second time I've been to the Capitol building. So I didn't know what to expect. You know, you're in front of lawmakers and attorneys and people, and you know, you don't know what to do. I have no experience in front of.
You weren't used to even public speaking, I know, right?
No, and I didn't know how any of this really worked. Add to that, I'm going to go and talk about my daughter being murdered.
Yeah.
You know, and I felt like I was representing the other families that I know that are going through the same thing, and so it's.
What was the reaction like?
It was. So was Senator Whitmire was the committee chair, I guess, at the time.
Senator Huffman is the vice chair.
Huffman was
Yes, we had
there.
local, yeah.
Yeah, so it was a lot there. They were very kind to me, very sympathetic. They apologized for me even being there. But I think they thanked me, you know, for my testimony. I think it's important, and I think it's more compelling.
Yeah.
Than someone who has direct experience, you know.
Right.
I said over and over again, who's going to tell a grieving mom no, right? Who's going to tell a grieving family member, not
Yeah.
just a mom, anyone with direct experience no? And I put myself in the lawmaker's shoes, and if, again, they work for us, right? We voted them in. And so if those people that voted me in show up and give me a real-time example of their experience, then again, that's more compelling testimony than someone who's paid to be there. And there's a lot of people, you know, there's a lot of people that are paid to show up and support or
Lobbyists
you know,
and,
again,
yeah.
well, no, regular people, not just lobbyists.
Yeah,
but,
right.
That blew my mind.
Yeah.
Now, I remember telling you on when we had Senate Bill 6 that was the no PR bonds for defendants charged with certain violent crimes. And when we went up and testified, there were 10 of us in support of that. 7 of us were from Crime Stoppers. The opposition, and I tell you what, I respect the opposition. I'm going to tell you why I respect them. Number one, they're organized.
Yeah.
Number two, they show up, and they're well funded, and they attend, and I respect that. And you know, I might not agree with you,
Right.
but there were over 80 people and groups who were opposed to that, and they were there to make their voices heard. We struggle just to get, you know, people, you know, up there. It's not easy to do, you know, because you have to travel,
Yeah.
and you don't get much notice. You're lucky if you get a 48-hour notice in the window to be able to do that, and then to share your story amongst, you know, so many
Right.
people. That's
When they were opposing it, what was their argument?
their argument was again that there shouldn't be monetary. The
Yeah.
issue, you know, money shouldn't be the caveat to determine whether someone should be released or not.
But then you go back to what else can you do? I mean, if you don't have monetary bonds,
Well, our point was we're not restricting nonviolent offenders.
Right.
Our point was that we were given PR bonds to defendants charged with murder,
Right.
ag robbery, and all sorts of violent crimes.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
well,
you know?
look how many breaking bonds we did on people
That's
that
how
were
it-
out on a PR bond that went on to commit a murder.
No, that's how the genesis of this show.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're still doing it now over 4 years, you know, speaks volumes. But that also, and like Leticia said, that shows you that those organizations and groups that are opposed, they show up.
Yeah.
And that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The challenge in that, though, is getting people like me, people that are affected by all these violent crimes, to show up. Not only do we have regular jobs and regular lives that we have to go on, but so many of us are still traumatized.
Sure.
We're having trouble making it through the day. So it's my intent, and a couple of other friends, more news on that to come, but we need to build these families, victims' families up. We need to give them the resources that they need, give them the support that they need, educate them on the processes so that we can get them stronger, so then we can then rally the troops and go and give really compelling testimony. We're there because we have direct experience. Here's my spin on it. When I went and testified for the, I can't remember the bill's name, the evidence.
The Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Basically, it's known as the Santa Fe case, and give
Right.
a little background on that. Was the Santa Fe school murder guy had been declared basically insane, incompetent, and the fact that you had families that were barred from actually seeing the file because
And years had passed.
5 years, and more than likely they'll probably never have an opportunity to look through the file
Right.
and see what really went on and happened. So there was a big issue as far as actually giving the families access. And then it took a topsy-turvy turn with you guys,
that was
didn't it?
interesting. That was
This was a
fun.
lot different than the easy Senate Bill
Yeah.
404, but
Yeah,
this
yeah, that
one
was
had
interesting.
twists.
So we were on our way in, a couple of us were on our way into Austin to testify in support of this. And I will say that my spin on it, of course, my case was different, but my kind of input for this was, we had not gone to trial yet, so mine was still, had not been adjudicated. So I thought, if I have to go to trial and see evidence, I'm going to have to see it for the first time in front of the man who brutally murdered my daughter. And I don't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart in court. And so I would like the respect of seeing a side, private, seeing the evidence. I can have my reaction and I can walk into court ready,
Yeah.
right? And so that was kind of a spin a lot of people really didn't think about, but that was a way I could support this law, right? This is great. So that was, again, my input. So we're driving into Austin, and we get word of a midnight hour change in the language of the bill, which basically excluded every victim but those of Santa Fe. So the thousands of other Texans families or cases that this affects were essentially excluded. And I don't know, I can't remember how we found out about it, but
A little bird.
a little bird told us, and so we were able to get our hands on that midnight hour change. And unbeknownst to the sponsor of that bill, we went in and flipped our testimony. And I think I told Whitmire, I came here with the intention to support this. I can no longer do that because now that this excludes me and thousands of other Texans family.
You can't have a special class for just
for
one
that.
victim.
What was the
right.
reaction when you kind of flipped?
Oh,
What was
I
the?
have a photo somewhere. I'll have to show it to you off camera. But the sponsor, he was flabbergasted. I'm sure he was not expecting that. We completely flipped on him, and I will say afterwards, he walked right past us.
Didn't
After
have anything
the-
to say
didn't
to
a
you.
word. I could see his dust going back. So I have no idea what that was about. I probably will never know what that was about. But it's just interesting learning experience.
And that happens a lot
Oh,
sometimes, right? With things.
There's a lot of behind the scenes
Yeah.
maneuvering and manipulation. I remember one time we were there to oppose, and you covered the story, the good time credit bill,
Yeah.
where they were proposing actually giving good time credit for violent offenders for parole eligibility, to expedite their parole eligibility. And we got up there the evening before and actually had the state representative call me at 10 o'clock that night. And you don't normally get a phone call from the actual state representative. And so he was telling me, I'm going to gut the bill. It's, call your dogs off. If anyone's driving up that day, they don't need to be up here and all that stuff. So there's a lot of things that happen, and you just got to be, willing to be flexible.
Is it pretty rare for a bill to make it all the way through without a bunch of different changes?
I would say yes and no. It just depends on the bill. It's pretty rare on its first try
Yeah.
to get it passed. That's
Well,
not
and there
any,
have been instances where it's taken you 3 or 4 sessions, right?
Oh, the best one that I tell people, you want to talk about a story of perseverance, and this was members of Parents of Murdered Children and surviving family members of homicide. And in this particular case, you probably covered it, was Carolyn Harden's son, Stephen, that was towing a truck that was illegally parked. He was contracted by this mobile home company, and the individual got out and shot him because he didn't want his truck, killed him, and went to trial, and he was convicted of murder, and then inexplicably was put on probation. And we were like, how do you get probation for murder? We couldn't, we're like, you got to be kidding me. And then come to find out, this was not as an anomaly as you might think. There were dozens of cases that got like that. So in 1999, we had a bill sponsored that basically said, if you get convicted of murder, you're not getting probation.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. You would have thought that was a no-brainer. We were opposed by the usual opponents. We were also opposed by the prosecutors because they didn't want to
They
lose
wanted to
their
have the
discretion.
leeway. Yeah.
And one of the ways that when they called me, they said, well, here's one of the mitigating factors, mercy killing. What do you know for someone that takes a pillow over an invalid? And I said,
Right.
you know what, you can build in language
Right.
for those one or two cases.
Yeah.
Right.
We started that in 1999. 7 legislative sessions. 12 years later,
Wow.
2011, it passed. But it doesn't pass unless we keep going up there. And that's the beauty of the story, is that we never gave up. Yeah, we got knocked down, we got kicked around, but we kept coming, and we finally got it passed. So now you can't get probation if you get convicted of murder.
When you go into it, I take it that you have to sort of be a little skeptic, right? Thinking that, well, it's not going to be exactly like this. I mean, when do you start looking at it like, okay, we're going to have to do some back and forth, and okay, we'll give you this if you give us that kind of
There's a
thing?
lot of compromises
There is.
that go on, and some of it had to do with, let's say, the parole set-off bill. One time it was 3 years. Then we ended up moving it to 5 years. Then we got it to 10 years. And when we got it to 10 years, all of a sudden they snuck back in the 3 years
Yeah.
without me even knowing it. So you just you never, until it's actually done and signed by the governor, you can't unequivocally state.
Right.
But there's some that, for whatever reasons, simply either they sail through, or some of the no-brainer ones, for example, hit-and-run fatalities. There used to be a statute of limitation. You had 3 years
That's all?
to solve.
Wow.
Yes,
Wow.
you had 3 years to solve a hit-and-run fatality. We all know how difficult they are to solve to begin with.
Right.
But why in God's name did we put a cap on the time? So it took 3 sessions, 6 years
Wow.
to get it passed. Now it's unlimited, like in any other homicide. So what I call no-brainer bills, I'm actually more leery of, because something always seems to happen or sidetrack it.
And this is a big deal because you're talking about making a law or changing a law. That's the way it's going to be from here on out in the state of Texas regarding this particular situation, this particular law. I mean, it's set in stone.
The beauty of the legislative session, like Leticia was saying, is that you can have a voice.
Right.
And not only can you have a voice by appearing in person, but for example, in the House, you're allowed to submit comments. You can actually go on a bill and submit your comments.
I've done that.
And you've
Yeah.
done that.
So
Right.
the evidence bill that I was speaking of, so because of that exclusive language, so this was in the Senate when I went to testify, so because of that exclusive language, that kind of got shelved. But the sister bill that passed was in the House and did not have that exclusive language. So I was able to then go online and give the same testimony I had prepared originally.
Yeah.
In support of that one.
Yeah.
So, and I will say too, anybody that goes and testifies, to make sure that your testimony, your original testimony, is recorded correctly, because when I went back to transcripts from the Senate one where I flipped my testimony,
Yeah.
they had it wrong. They had that I was in support of it. So
I've seen that
I was
happen,
Like,
yeah.
No, I did not
Yeah.
want it on record that I was in opposition of it. So that's another thing that I learned. But again, it's these laws until it applies to you, it doesn't apply to you. And,
Right.
and sadly, I never thought in my wildest dreams that anything criminally related was going to apply to me until it did.
And that's probably most people.
Right, and
You would watch the news and you just sit there and go,
Yeah.
well, yeah, right.
Yeah, you think, oh, that's terrible. I
Yes.
feel so bad for that family, but you don't think, well, that's going to be me
Right.
in a month or
Right,
whatever.
Right. And so that's why it's so important for when things like this do happen to you to really step up, because you really, really can make a difference, and you should. Again, these laws are for us. We elect these people in, they work for us, and they need to hear from us.
I think it makes a big difference when people just shoot an email or a phone call to their lawmaker and say, "Hey, I'm for this. I'm against this." Lawmakers pay attention to that. They know that it's the people that put them there.
And they're busy, I get it, but you have to keep at it.
Yeah.
You have to be persistent, and that's when you really make a difference. You cannot back down.
What do you think was the biggest thing you kind of learned from it or gained from it by doing it?
I thought about this a long, long time ago. I just prayed and I said, God, I don't know what you want me to do with this. I don't know what you want me to do with this, but I'll go wherever you lead me. And so what my biggest lesson so far is that the work that I can do to help other families, to testify, to help change laws, whatever influence that I do have because of this, my daughter's legacy will live on long after I'm gone,
That's right.
just as her life should have.
Yeah.
So because she's gone, her legacy will live on hopefully longer than she would have been. So in that way, that mom love that I have for my kid, this is a way for me to, in a healthy, productive way, make lemonade out of the lemons that were given to me. And so that's so motivating as a mom.
Yeah.
I'm doing this for her and for other people, but I'm really doing this to help continue my kid's legacy. I have so much love for her, nowhere to put it, and I can put it here. And if that's motivating to anyone else, you should do it, right? That's a little selfish, but it's whatever.
That's great.
It works.
I know there's going to be a lot of things this legislative session that you're going to be looking at, bringing up, hoping about. Give us a couple examples.
So one of the things we actually have been featured on Breaking Bond, and one of them was a case involving a young mother of three, Shaniqua Banks, that was allegedly murdered by a guy on parole. He was on parole for aggravated robbery, then he was charged with a nonviolent felony, and they gave him a PR bond. Parole division issued a warrant 5 days later. On that 6th day is when he was charged with the murder of a 24-year-old mother of three. So I'm looking at this going, first of all, you're on parole for a violent offense.
Right.
You shouldn't get a PR bond,
Right.
period. I think that should be a no
Parole
for a violent offense and was charged with a felony, another charge.
while he was on parole.
While he was on
charged with a
parole,
felony.
and they gave him a PR bond.
Violent crime.
Right.
So he's on parole, committed a violent crime.
No, not a violent crime. It was a nonviolent crime.
Nonviolent
He was
crime.
on parole for a violent offense.
Yeah. But his
Right.
parole could have been revoked.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Instead
before
of
the
PR bond.
but before parole got an opportunity to think about that, he's out on a PR
And
bond.
that was another case that we featured here. Was another guy who was on parole for assault with intent to impede breathing, which is strangulation.
Yeah.
He's on parole. He's charged with felon in possession of a weapon, a gun, and he's given a cash bond. He posted the bond. 4 hours after he bonded out, parole issued their warrant. 4 hours too late.
Right. Yeah.
Remember that?
Before they're bonded out or given a PR bond, is it procedure to check? Like
That's what we're going to.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Yeah. To get that in place
What
where
we
you
are
pretty much
asking
have
for is a 48-hour
to hold. Right.
Yeah.
period. You have 48 hours
To decide.
determine whether you're issuing your warrant or not.
Right.
Yeah.
If you issue the warrant, good. We already got you. We don't have to go look. Right. And if not, then fair game. You can get a bond and bond out.
That's right. There's going to be a lot going on this legislative session that Andy and other folks are going to be pushing related to crime. We're going to be talking about for you. And hey, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And remember to be kind to yourself and everyone else. Thank you for watching. Have a good one.